And just like that, my friend, we are in and live on another interview here on the Longbox Punk. That's me. I'm Chris. He's David Doub. He has a brand new Kickstarter that just launched like 3 hours ago.
Yep, 3 hours. Still
3
fresh from the oven.
hours post-launch, and you're already just out there grinding away, doing interviews. And I appreciate you taking out the time on your launch day to hang out with me and talk a little bit about your book, about horror, about music, and who knows what else, because we're live. So anything is fair game here. But first and foremost, David, I want to know, like, what's your origin story? How did you end up in comics? Like, why now for Dusk and for Love Bites? And like, how did you end up here?
Well, the origin story is I tell the story so many different ways, but I'm gonna tell it my favorite way. Is I remember when I was a kid and I had a few ratty old comics, as I read them so many times, and I can't remember, but they were from a toy company promotion. I think it was one of the Witten toy ones, and so I had a couple of those. I remember one was like Superman pushed an asteroid that somehow split him and Clark Kent, and so he had to find the asteroid and put himself back together, and that just kind of started it. And I remember it was around the Acts of Vengeance plot line from Marvel. Mm-hmm. I was young enough to where we had a 7-Eleven down the street. I know those are still around, but there's a spinner rack, and that's where I picked up a couple. Nice. But I missed a few. And my dad, he's never been a big nerd, but he knows things, and he's all like, "Well, David, there's these things called comic book shops, and they have old issues that you can go and pick what you want." And I was like, "What? What?" So he took me to this abandoned strip mall. Like, literally, there was like the comic shop and a Showbiz Pizza at one end. So we're walking down there. Everything is empty, and I go into this nice little clean store, and I just go through all the back issues. And then it was a Avengers West Coast that I needed.
Yeah.
When Scarlet Witch went mad again, unfortunately, and so then I just started buying those, and that just kind of set off the love affair. But then when I wanted to do my own comics, I was all like, yeah, everyone does superheroes. And I got a little snooty. It's like, well, if I do superheroes, I will do the paid ones and they will pay me. I'm not going to invent, not Batman. I will be paid for Batman. And so I did my other love, which was horror, which I grew up in the 80s. So we had, Lost Boys, Near Dark. And then I started falling down that rabbit hole where going back in, the Victorian age with the whole the Paldori and, of course, Stoker and all of that. And that's why I started with Dusk. But also the other dirty little secret is I did a lot of role playing, and it being the 90s, we did live action role playing where we were vampires, dressed up in our goth, club wear out in the park someplace. And so I took some of the characters from that, and I was all like, I'm going to make a comic out of it. That should be easy. And well, I make assumptions a lot, and I've been learning a lot since then. So that was, the origin story.
That's great. So horror, I mean, having been in the 80s at the peak of like really what now is like the cult following of 80s horror, like you got to experience that firsthand. Do you still feel the like nostalgia for it? Like, because I was born in the 80s, but I didn't get into 80s horror until like late 90s and then into like high school and college. That's when I really was like, there was so much going on in the 80s. Like, do you still have that same experience, or is it all just kind of like, I was there, like, okay?
It's funny because it's hard to be nostalgic because the technology won't keep up with us. Like, I loved seeing Kindred Vampire, the TV show. And I was like, even though that's not true horror, but that was pretty cutting edge for its time. I was like, oh my God, they never did a DVD, so I had it on VHS forever. And I can't keep around VHS players and VHS tapes for that, and it's like, we'll go find it streaming. And I was like, what? You know,
Yeah.
they don't put everything on streaming. I was lucky to find the Blade series, which is later, not 80s, but still, you know, on Tubi for all that. So it's not a matter of if I want to be nostalgic, is, you know, the technology, you know, or the modern technology doesn't allow it, you know, in this gold, which it's funny, reversely, if you want to see great old styled horror, people are making it every day. And, you know, it's streaming all over the place. But if you want to see the stuff that it's inspired by, no, you can't see that. Which now, speaking about it, that's kind of funny, because I always would get frustrated by that, because like when not knock on Tarantino, but Tarantino would do a lot of like inspired by, you know, Hong Kong movies and all that, and I was like, that's great. I want to go see the Hong Kong movies they're inspired by. It's like, no, you can't get a hold of those, but you can get that. So something I've always ran into is like, no, I want, you know, I want the niche stuff. It's like, well, you can only be so hipster, David, until they, you know, they cut you off.
Right. I want the original, like, no dubs. Give me the original language. Give it to me subbed.
Yeah,
that's what I want to watch. I don't want to watch the thing that was like, oh, that's cool, I can do that, but like different. I'm right there with you. I would rather see the originals. And it's not that Tarantino makes bad movies. I just, like, you can see the evidence of what he is inspired by, and so that makes me want to see what he was inspired by. Just to see like what it stirs up in me, because it can't be like a singular event of like he's the only person that was ever inspired by those movies.
It was just him watching it, and it's like, no.
Right.
And it's funny, the reason I thought of Tarantino and Kill Bill, because at the time Kill Bill came out and they let him have two versions of it. It was with Miramax, and Miramax also that same year had Hero and Shaolin Soccer, which they did edit and clean up. And I was all like, you give him two movies, and yet, you know, not like they were old stuff, but, you know, you get it from the motherland of where, you know, of his inspiration. But that you got to clean up for, you know, U.S. audience. And no, you know.
Right. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So did you also like read horror comics growing up, or was it just the movies? And then...
Oh, Lord, no. I got because again, with the 80s, there was the black and white boom. Yeah. And there was lots of horror stuff. Like, one of my favorite publishers, which is not around anymore, and you can't find reprints or mention of them, was called Millennium. Okay. And they did a lot of just horror comics. They did some other stuff later, but they got so frou-frou with their horror comics. Like, they had a model / poet writing one, and she only drew it in chalk, sort of thing. And I was like, you know, as a teenager, you're like, oh God, this is so cool.
Right.
But also I got to see a lot. I collected a lot of Tim Vigil's and David Quinn's Faust.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever got to enjoy that, because
I haven't.
They've collected it now and re-released it. And Faust was brutal. Brutal. It's basically an old school damnation hell story, and it's no holds barred, as much as you can get away with in black and white, you know, totally, to where it's funny nowadays when they're all like, oh, we must ban these comics from schools. Like, you should have seen the shit I was reading. This is oh no, boys are kissing. Oh, someone, you know, bleep somebody until their intro sold out. But no, that's whatever.
Yeah, it really is like we just forget how graphic everything used to be. And like we turned out fine. Like, I was raised reading the first and it wasn't like gruesome, but my introduction to horror was a double feature that was on my grandmother's like furniture TV in her living room. And it was The Birds and Psycho back to back. And I was maybe 10, maybe. And like, I was over at her house for the weekend, and I just sat down, and she didn't care. And she was just like, she didn't know what it was either. And so we just sat down and watched, and halfway through she was like, I don't think you should be seeing this. And I said, but Nana, I need to know what happens. Like, how we got to watch this. And so she just let it. And then my dad came over, and he was like, what are you watching? And she told him, and he was like, I guess he's old enough. Yeah, okay. And so he sat down and watched Psycho with us. And it was like, ever since then, it was just like, I don't, I can separate, like this is a movie as
Mhm,
opposed to societally. Like, I remember after Columbine, they were like, well, do away, like,
mhm.
that's terrible for Marilyn Manson. And, like I was a big metalhead in high school. And so I was listening to all of that stuff. Like, I listened to Marilyn Manson. So automatically my mom was like, now, Christopher, are you okay? Like, you're listening to and it's that happened. I'm like, Ma, it's different. Like, it's completely, that's music and I'm living life. I don't need to,
Yeah,
make one just the same all the way across the board.
yeah.
So
Let me hit 3 things you reminded me of real quick. I'll try
yeah.
to jump through them. First, that reminded me of I remember in middle school, one of the first horror things I really got to read, and it was checked out from the school library, was the Uncut Stand
Okay.
by Stephen King,
Yep.
which some of it just had some graphic, violent sex stuff in there, which you could have cut out. And I'm like, yeah, no, I could see why, because some of us are like, what? But so that was messed up. And then, shoot, I forgot the second one. But no, after, oh no, yeah, the metal stuff and all that too. Another thing in high school that reminded me, I remember after Cobain committed suicide, the
Mhm.
counselors were all like, hey, are you guys okay? So I'm like, he was sad, he made choices. It had nothing to do with,
Right.
we had nothing to do with that. It wasn't like he was our leader.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a cult in the desert where
Hmm.
like, oh, Kurt did the thing, now we must do the thing too.
But the big thing is I did a story when I was fresh out of high school when Columbine hit. Not fresh, it was a few years, but and everyone was like, "Oh, what happened? What happened?" And so I'm like, high school is hard, man. Like hard, like
Yeah.
freaking mental torture, and people will snap, and so I had to do and it took me like, God, like 15 years to finally do it. And I put half of, it's called Demons in the Darkness.
Mm.
And it's a play off of D&D's Evil and, being bullied in high school. And it took me 15 years to finally write it. And I put half of it out in the Texas Horror Anthology. And it's been frustrating because like all these publishers love it, but they're like, it's a tricky fit. And I was like, no, it's not. It's brutal. It's just punch in the face.
Right.
Well,
Right.
well, customers don't like being punched in the face. Like, well, some do.
Yeah, some need it too.
Yeah.
Now, is that something that that you would like just go the Kickstarter route and put the story together and just like, here's the thing?
Well, that was one, and I'm a couple of things with that story. I self-financed it before
Okay.
Kickstarter was big,
Yeah.
and then I tried to shop it around, and then that didn't work. So, and then I tried to go. I was trying to think big, and I was like, oh, I need to do, and I was trying to do a big run so I could have enough to get it into stores because
Mm.
that's the trick is to I won't get into the long and short of it of Diamond, which is kind of becoming moot at this point, but
Yeah.
Diamond will, not only will they just determine if it's profitable by content, but by price point,
Mm.
and predominantly based upon their cut. The only way you're going to get a price point low enough is if you do a high order um, yeah, offset printing, and the only
Okay.
best those deals are overseas, like in China.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do a Kickstarter for that. It's like, oh, I'll get the whole run and I'll cover it in the first place, but it was just too big and unwieldy. So that's one of the many things. And you actually gave me the idea. Maybe I should revisit it and redo it as a smaller thing because it's already paid for and made, and just be like, hey, I'm not risking anything. And
Yeah.
I've actually been thinking that on a couple of books to where I'm like, oh, I can get them out. They're already done and not have to do this whole like, oh, I got to pay for everybody because everyone likes to get paid.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely like every crowdfunding thing now is like, well, what's the risk? And if the
Mm-hmm.
book's already done, it's like there isn't like
Yeah.
it's already done. As soon as everything is funded, I can pay for printing and off the file goes.
Yep. And that's the trick too, is because, and maybe I'm telling another dirty secret, but with some Kickstarters, they keep the amount lower than what they actually need, and they hope that it'll overflow some.
Yeah.
because you don't want to scare people off, and I'm like, I can't take that risk because it's an all or nothing scenario, and I don't want to be like, oh, I only need $1,000, and then you only get $1,000. You're like, crap, what do I do about the other $1,000 I needed?
Right.
And some people, they got that wiggle room, and I don't have that wiggle room anymore. So I'm just like, okay, you got to shoot for the whole thing.
Yep. So, okay. So speaking of Kickstarter, look at this natural transition. So you've got Dusk Love Bites live right now. So tell me about the story. How does it fit into the universe as a whole? Because you have three volumes that are on Global Comics right now too.
Yeah, three full graphic novels. That's the example of, and that's a trick to where, real quick aside, is to where I have plenty of content, but it needs to be cleaned up and colored to where even there it would be costs. So I have no problems giving love and just throwing it out there in Global Comics. But yeah, 3 volumes of that, and there's also a novel and a short story collection.
Okay.
That I need to get that all read back out there. Oh, it's so much fun managing your backlist while producing new stuff.
Right.
And this is actually a redo of an old Dusk story. The original one was just about was a much simpler story. It was meant to be kind of a shock and awe sort of thing where Eve meets another thrall, and he's in a more restrictive environment, and she kind of messes around with him, flirtatiously, and that causes him to, break his facade or show emotion for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then so, not giving too much away, but he suffers for it. And that was great at the time when I was, in my 20s. I'm like, ooh, that's edgy, It's a little like, you show emotion, you suffer. And,
Yeah.
but now I'm like, well, let's give it some context. And so in this time, so like, well, why is he here? What would be so empty in his life to make him be a thrall? Because Eve was a thrall because she came from a broken marriage, and the only person who wasn't that big of a dick was a vampire of all people, to where it's like, oh, you're not that much of an asshole. So like, that's not a good measure, but
right.
Okay.
Yeah, when your bar is here, it's like anybody can be above it.
But he's all like, you're an adult, whatever.
Right.
So we explore into his the other thrall's past to see what caused him to do it, and I play back into a classic theme of modern vampirism with basically play up with the whole fact that he was not giving too much away, because it's in the first half of the story is that he was gay, or he still was gay, but he kind of just shunted that, and it was kind of meant to. And I was like, well, that's something in the vampire mythos I've never really played before, is, the whole vampirism as a reflection of homosexuality. So I was like, let's give that a go. And also it's easier to get away with that stuff, because I give another quick example. I grew up with comics, and a lot of them got censored hard. I remember I grew up in Texas for a while, and I remember a guy got arrested for obscenity, for selling comics to an adult that were pornographic.
Oh wow!
And the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund came in, and they had all these expert witnesses. Like, if I could remember their names, big names in the comic field.
Yeah.
And the prosecution didn't have any expert witnesses. They just stuck with, well, comics are for kids, so therefore that is obscenity, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
And it got kicked back. It got appealed all the way up to the court before the Supreme Court, and they never got rid of that. So that was the sort of mindset of self-censoring that was stuck in my head. So like, well, you can go full, you can go balls to the wall, but they're going to get you. And you're like, okay. But nowadays, comics, you can get away with so much more without needing, a good lawyer or, a good bunker. So I've been wanting to explore topics, especially in this kind of charged environment nowadays. It's just like, doesn't make me want to conform. I want to argue and fight, and the best medium I do it in is in comics.
It's incredible to me, the like just how much you can do, that there really are like no rules with comics, especially with indie comics, because you don't have the publisher saying like, well, that's not going to fit our form. It's like, well, okay, then I'm not going to put it out with you. Like, I'm just going to do it myself. And I love the stories that we're getting, because creators are just tired of being told like, well, this doesn't fit, or like, you could do this, but if you change this, and this, then we can do it. And it's like, well, you just changed my entire story. So like, no. And just the ability now of creators to say, I'm going to do it myself. I'm just going to bootstrap it, pick it up. I'm going to start an imprint. I'm going to release it. I'm going to crowdfund it. I'm going to put it on Global Comics. I'm going to, like, there's so many options now that I feel like creators can just tap into anything. And it's like, okay, so why aren't you writing your comic? Like, what's stopping you now?
Yeah, no, and it's funny how widespread even people outside of comics know that thing, to where that's why you always see like an animator who's gotten tired of working the grind of working on whatever big IPs, like, well, I'm going to do my art and idea as a comic, or like, oh, I couldn't sell my pitch to Hollywood. It's like, you can go make it a comic, which does make it a little bit crowded, but that's the, the pro and con of this environment.
Right.
So like, no, it's a free for all sometimes.
Yep. And I've seen a lot of that discourse. And I like always take any discourse that I read on any social media or article or anything with a very large grain of salt. But some people are very against like Slash doing Deathstalker, and like celebrities getting into and writing comics.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but then you've got like Keanu Reeves with Berserker. He came alongside, like brought other creators alongside with him and made a really kick-ass book. And like, you had Keanu Reeves telling late night show hosts like, yeah, I made a comic. Comics are rad. Like, how is that bad? That's like, I understand now, there's another book with another big name that's out there that some might see as a competition. But if you change the perspective of like, yeah, but he's talking about comics using his platform as one of the modern classic, like best actors that there is, period. Like, he's talking about comics. Who better to talk about comics and raise awareness and get more people doing it and into the shops? And then suddenly you're going to be buying other stuff. Like, how is that bad for it? I just don't like, I don't understand how that's bad.
I do get it. Not like I am upset, but unfortunately, comics has a built-in low self-esteem to some of it, which is kind of bad. But I see it because everyone sees the success and they get jealous and they get frustrated. And the way I explain it is, it's like, that's not your audience. Like if I think Ronda Rousey was doing a comic, they're all like, oh, and they're like, she's taken away from us. Like, no. Her audience is going to follow her, and that's not your audience, especially if you don't have the same type of book,
Right.
So it's not, they're not taking money out of your pocket, and that's the way people see it. And I understand it because I've sat there at many cons going, oh, they're taking my money. It's like, it's not your money. Not your money until they buy your book. And you got to realize, you got to look at the things of, like, well, they're more visible. It's like, well, yes, but what are they visible for? Like, is it going to be a crossover or not? And is it a big enough crossover? And there's a reason for these things. So you have to focus on your shit. You can't focus on other people's, because they're doing their thing. They have their fan base. There may be some overlap, but they're not coming in and be like, oh, there are $20 in the comic world pool.
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves comes in and just took $17 of it, and the rest of you have to fight over the last $3. Like, that's not how that works. It's all like, oh, we had $20. He has a fan base of $100. I'm keeping the numbers low so I can keep track.
Right. Keep it easy. Yeah, that's perfect.
And he comes in with his $100 and leaves with his $100. He didn't touch our shit. Maybe he took 50 cents somewhere, but it's not enough to be like, damn it.
Yeah, like, grab your pitchforks.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. No, I mean, that makes sense. It's probably because I don't have my own comic book that I don't think of it that way. But hearing it that way, like, that makes sense. Because it is very easy. Like, even at my regular job, because believe it or not, I have a regular job. This isn't it.
I think that's the dirty secret we all have, or I like to call it the day gig.
Yeah, it's my bill job, and then this is my fun job. But my bill job, like, it's hard for me to step out of the like, I'm competing with everybody else for the promotion, with everybody else for the raise, and to step aside from that. So thinking of it in those terms, even though I know like we're either going to get raises or we're not, like it's not dependent on, me outperforming him or her or whoever. And so I like, as a creator, that would definitely probably play out exactly that same way. And I would probably be the person sitting at the table at the con, like, man, come over here, stop in, get over here.
And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're all like, fuck you to read. And you're all like, people just see you going, and you're like, okay, yeah.
Yep. I want some positive books. He looks upset, so I'm going to keep going.
He's going to knife me.
Yep.
I put it, because you're talking about all this good stuff from the 80s. I learned bad stuff from the 80s too, because that was all the Reagan era, Top Gun and Rambo, and it was all about you are the lone wolf, you defeat everyone else, and you are win, yay! And you find out like you get exhausted and tired and beaten, and so again, it's all like, oh, you gotta put it in a different perspective.
Yep. Yeah, it's constantly, and anybody that's watching this that has watched any of my other interviews has probably heard me say, like, you have to, there's so much negative available that instead of like, I don't understand the like hate shaming or hate watching or hate reading where they like consume media just to turn around and be like, meh! I don't understand that at all. I would much rather read and consume media or watch TV or watch movies or whatever, and then be like, hey, I just experienced this really awesome thing. Like, you should go experience it for yourself, because as a horror fan and as somebody that likes vampires, I haven't read a story like Love Bites where it explores the themes that you're exploring and it sits in like scenarios and those relationships that you've developed with the characters. Like, reading that only said, okay, well, I'm going to interview David. So like, let's go to his link tree and see what's on his link tree. Oh, he has all of his stuff on Global Comics. I am very quickly learning to love Global Comics, and that's just taking over my screen time because I keep finding more creators that are putting stuff on there. And the fact that you've got those first 3 trades on there is like, great. Well, I enjoyed this first one, and it made me go, well, what's the story that I've missed? Okay, I'll go read that. So when I backed your Kickstarter, I was like, give me the whole digital everything. Like, just give it all to me, because I just want to read all of it, because I love when I find something. And part of that is just I'm a completionist. Yeah. And like, I'm not okay with only with having holes and gaps in my knowledge. I would rather like read the entire thing. And, we mentioned Lord of the Rings before we became live. Like, I had to watch the extended ones because I knew they were out there, and I loved reading the books and I enjoyed the movies in theaters. So I bought the extended volume, whatever. And you bet your ass I sat for like 14 hours and watched all 3 movies extended back to back to back. Like, that's just who I am. But I
get that. And with today, we're in a golden age where you can get that a lot more. And it kind of reminds me going back, because you're all like, oh, being nostalgic for it was not being a completist. You couldn't be a completist. Like, nope, that's out of print. Nope, they don't show that anymore. Nope, that no one owns the rights to that. The guy who had it, and that made it more interesting because it was all like this forbidden, cobbled lore they had stuck in your head. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't if I could refuse being modern access to it. I'm like, no, I'm not that stupid. But it does, make it an interesting way to take it now, because nowadays you can be all like, I didn't get the ending of that. You can go Google it up and be all like, what's it? And a lot of times just other people making guesses like, no, I want to hear an interview from the director or something. Right. But it's like almost like we have too much access, because I remember when director commentaries were like a new thing. And you're like, because I remember we would take, with my first wife, we would take road trips, and she'd watch The Lord of the Rings on our portable DVD player, but she would play the commentary, and it was with the cast, and they're all just goofing around. And you're like, oh, wow. Yeah. But in it is, sorry, I was just amazing at the different times. You're like, no, in the old days, you'd have to hope. and maybe not. And I know that's where a lot of collecting for comics came big, because you got to find those issues, and now you're like, yeah, you can find them if you want, you just got to pay the price.
Yeah.
Or and now I've never done comic collecting like that anymore. I'm like, I'll just get the trade.
Yeah, it's funny because like in the last probably 3 years, I have switched how I collect. Like I have 14 long boxes of stuff, and I was just like, I don't have any more like it goes almost wall to wall in my office, and I can't keep doing this. Like I have to start getting more picky and choosy with like, okay, I have certain runs that I'm trying to complete, and like I have the first 149 issues of X Factor. I want that damn 150 and I can't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go online and buy it, because for me it's the thrill of the hunt. And I was talking to my wife about it because I just did that today, where I was on the other side of town, and there's a shop over there that I haven't been to in years, and they've changed management, which was good because the old manager was weird. And so like I went in to the shop and I spent like 3 hours in there just digging through, and I found a ton of holes in my runs. But like I didn't try and pick up new stuff. It was just like, I'm just trying to complete what I've got, because new issues, I'll pick up issue 1 to like support the creators, figure out if I'm actually going to like the story. And then if I do, I just trade wait. And then like, 4 or 5 months later, it comes out on trade and I pick up the trade, and then I have it. And like telling that to my local shop owner that I've been going to for like 15 years, I was like, hey, I got to scale my pull list way back, because like I don't have room. I need to start switching over to trades. And like I prefer that format anyway. I want to be able to sit down and read the whole story in one go, because honestly, like my memory is garbage. And so if I'm reading like 8 titles a month, if I go a month between reading one issue to the second, I've read 7 other stories, and there's been 30 days of life that happened. So like I'm reading them and I'm like, I don't remember what we're talking about. Like who the hell are they talking about right now? And it's somebody that was in the last issue, but if I'm waiting and reading it as it comes out, I completely miss it. So I love trades. I love like one shots. I have this weird, I don't have any within reach. I have this weird new kink where I'm like buying all the square bound, like 80-page books, where it's like, it's maybe the total of 2 or 3 issues, but it's one complete story. There's no breaks. There's no nonsense. I can read it in one sitting easily. And now those are the books that I'm seeking out and finding. And also like I'm trying to find a lot of old horror, which is impossible to find.
Actually, I should give you a link later. They don't have a lot of horror, but they have like digital, like they had all the Vampirella magazines digitally.
Oh, cool.
So like 200 issues for like $5. And this was all legal. I don't like the sketchy stuff. Yeah. And they had some other of the more obscure magazines. They didn't have like the hardcore stuff like Eerie and Creepy, but they had the adjacent other magazines that came around that time to jump in on it. And,
yeah.
But the two things I remember you were talking there is, one thing is I've become more of just a recycler, to where I don't even hunt for things. I will just I'll go to Ollie's. I don't know if you have Ollie's where you're at.
Yeah, we do.
Yep. I scour those religiously, and I'll just pick up random trades, and I'll scour dollar bins, and and also I love to do grab bags. I've always done that before. Ollie sometimes have them. Five Below sometimes has them, and I just grab them and I read them, and then I resell them, and then I just do it again. Yep. And so I mean, sometimes there's stuff more I want to get than others. Like, let's see if I can reach down and get this one. Sorry, I'm off screen. I'm gonna fall and die.
Oh no. I lost your audio. Nope, I don't have you. Oh, hang on. I think I can fix it. Try again. Oh, it looks like you're muted on StreamYard.
It muted me when it fell apart.
There it is. Yep. Got you again.
Obviously, you can tell I have comics right next to me all the
Yeah.
time. And it won't show me this because it keeps filtering it out. Oh, stupid.
Right? Is that the Doctor Strange omnibus that they had at Ollie's?
Yes, yes, yes. And the trick is, it was all back when David Quinn, again, he was an indie, hardcore horror writer. He wrote Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And I did Doctor Strange is one of the few things I've actually cosplayed. And I did his costume from that run when he was Strange. And of course, it was 90s. So he had like a face mask and it was all black with crazy lines. And
Yep. Yep.
but that's the sort of thing I'll get and just, burn through and all of that. And on the other side, it's funny because when I started Dusk, you're talking about whole units. When I started Dusk, I was trying to be super smart, and indie issues had a problem where, one or two will come out, but you don't know if you'll see three or four.
Yeah.
So I would collect it all into like 100-page volume, but then I would make it manga size. So,
Perfect.
it'd cover everything. It's like, that didn't work. But even now, I tried to do like 64 pages, or I even did a 72-pager with a printer. And he's like, yeah, we got to stop doing that. It's because we had to return a bunch because they were damaged. He's like, yeah, no, that was wrecking the printer. And I was like, yeah. I mean,
I took down the
yeah.
Damn it. I needed that printer.
So I get that, and and it's funny because on Kickstarter you see a lot of people now, they're all like, and it works for them. It's like, I do issue 1, 2, or they'll do like they're going up to double digits and all of that, and I'm like, even comics don't do that anymore. I mean, not I mean, Marvel and DC, they will get up to a point and they're like, we got to reboot. No one, but everyone goes, like, I want 500 issues. I was all like, that's like 50, 60 years.
Yeah. It's, I mean, like, look at Walking Dead, right? Like, they've got what? I think they're at 5 of those giant compendiums that collect like 5 volumes into one. And so, like, once you start doing the math, because I picked up, so I have gotten away from it because, again, money and space and my wife. But Goodwill auctions, they'll put up like a lot of trades, and it's like, hey, here's 6 trades, like, just bid $10, and if you win, pay $12 for FedEx, because that's the only drawback, is they do everything FedEx, so it's like hella expensive. But I like sometimes, and for me, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to pay $12 for shipping, I'm going to get my money's worth, and I'm not going to buy like one trade. I'm going to buy a lot of like 8 trades. And there was an auction that I won that was the first compendium of Walking Dead, the first compendium of Saga, and then like 2 volumes of Redneck, and like 3 or 4 other titles that were just all like randomly together. And I was like, that's worth it, because that's a lot of comics. But reading through Saga, it was like, God, this isn't even the whole thing. Like, they're going to be ready to put out a second one of those, I think, in October. And it's just as much, another 50 issues. Like, that's unheard of at the big 2. And then Spawn just hit, I think, 375 consecutive issues.
Spawn's a weird one, though, because if I remember correctly, he's like solicited a year behind, though. So technically he's at 500, but he should have had 600 out by now, sort of.
Right. Yeah, and now with all the expanded universe that Spawn is doing, and all of the things all the time, if you're a Spawn fan, you're eating well. And that comes to mind because I was just talking to that shop owner about Spawn. He was like, I got into it late, and then I was like, oh my God, there's so much to get into. I was like, yeah.
I remember I took a quick, because you want to take hot takes, and someone was showing that classic image, or that classic issue from like 4 or 5, where Cerberus shows up, and they show all of the these great creations in jails and all that.
Yeah.
And and I and I was like, I get it, that was great, but that's funny. This is from the same guy who's now building a universe based on other people's work for hire. And I was like, because no one gets that was the whole thing. They're like, oh, we don't own the rights, so let's go build Image. And let's
Yep.
I think the only one who still walks the walk is Larson, but he's just in Savage Dragon Forever. I think, what is it, the grandkids or whatever? But
I think so, yeah.
Yep. But you brought up the point of all these big long running titles, and like those are the exceptions. If you look at the average issue run out of Image, it's like it may be it's miniseries, 4 issues and all of that. But I get it. And it's like, oh, we got to tell these stories, which is funny because I've always ran into the people at shows like, and it's kind of them setting themselves up to not do it, to where they're like, oh, I have this 50 issue saga, but that's just too much to get into. And I get it partly because they're all like, oh, that prevents subconsciously prevents them from getting into it and not failing.
Yeah.
Like, I get that. But it's all like, and I always tell people, if you know that story well enough, you can just take a segment of it and boom, whet people's appetites, and then they're going to go for the next one and all that. Yep. No one's going to start out and and I think we have a bad perception of like, oh, everyone has to do the Cerberus or the Spawn or the Walking Dead. It's all like, I mean, even McFarlane, he did not start out doing Spawn. Right. He was, and it was a good confluence of events too. It was the 90s. Money was going insane. It's not just like, oh, anyone can do it. It's like, no, you gotta have right. It's a recipe. You gotta get it right.
Yep. And part of that recipe is just dumb luck. Like, yes. Had it not been the timing and the era and the mindset of like getting to the point where you're getting to fatigue with the big two, and then all of those creators saying, yeah, we're kind of sick and tired of like, we want to make our things, and then making something so drastically different from the big that suddenly it was like, no, that's a very viable third option. Had it not been for all of those other things and that group of creators being insanely talented, like it wouldn't have happened. And you can't take one of those elements out and still have that success that they did. You have to have it all there. And I think it's the same for anybody. Like, it has to just be the right timing, the right story, finding the right fans, doing like, there's so much that goes into it, but man, when you get it right, like, it's just the sweet spot that you get.
Yeah, but I don't think you can plan on lightning striking unless you have a time machine.
Right.
And you know where your 14 million gigawatts are going to be coming from.
Right. So speaking of, there's no easy transition. We're just going to go hard transition.
You just yell, transition!
This is what we call a transition. So in Love Bites, you've got a second crossover tale as like a backup to the main story in this issue. And I wrote it down, and I'm still going to say it wrong. The Aerobicide versus Dusk. How did that come to be?
I'm with Shonuff Studios, and that's me, Terry Parr, and Halo, and we've been working together forever. And one of his babies is Aerobicide, the Extreme Ninja Workout. And if you Google Aerobicide, it's actually one of the alternative titles for an old horror movie from the 80s involving aerobics. And so it basically is just Terry's love letter to 80s and tight outfits on women. So we've done stuff like that before. And since my character is a little bit longer lived because of vampirism and all the other stuff, like, oh, she could have been in the 80s. And with his side, I just do it sillier and all of that. And that's actually the story we did to help raise money, because he got COVID before everyone knew what was going on. Like, he was like tripping balls for a week. He literally was having hallucinations. It was pretty bad. And that half of the team, they all make a living off of their art. I whore myself out to the company man, but they walk the walk. And so we did it initially as just a fundraiser thing, but it's like, yeah, no, I talked to everyone involved. Can we go ahead and get this back out? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so we get to have a lot more fun. And that's, as you can see, that had a lot more pulp culture and
Yeah.
music references in there. I always have fun with that. But like the Eddie Murphy character, that is actually Terry sort of doing his Freddie Mercury sort of,
Yeah.
sort of jokes and all that. And we just have more fun with it.
That's cool. Yeah, it definitely felt like it was someone, and I didn't do enough research apparently because I didn't realize that you and Terry were part of the same that Shonuff Studios. But it read as though it was a team that just understood each other's characters that could easily put them together into a story and have like it was super fun. And I'm a sucker for like this super bright ultra neon anything. And so like having the neon pink to yellow washes for the sky behind the artwork, I was just like, man, that's so cool. Like this is such a fun read.
Then you should definitely check out, I do some of his writing for Robicide and for his new one called Gemini Force, which are basically these party rock girls in the kind of like the atomic future. So it's future, but it's all more, like ray guns and all that. And we totally have fun with that too. And I sneak in references of like Streets of Rage and all, just all sorts of
I love that. That's the game you mentioned. I love that game. That's super fun.
Well, that's like my benchmark for a lot of 80s stuff, especially the music. Like I have the guy getting to Dusk Love Bites. There's a song in there and a rap and all of that. That's all real. The rapper, that's Darren Tech Force, and the DJ is a DJ I know too, backing him up on that. And so that's one of his songs. Awesome. And he's I guess technically you would call him nerdcore, but he doesn't like I don't know how he feels about it, but he's like one of his first singles was SDF1.
Okay.
And all that. So I was like, oh, we got to put your song in there, and I was able to make it fit. And we if you watch the video, that's for the Kickstarter, that's the song that's playing is the actual song in the comic.
Okay, awesome.
Because that's something I like to do. Obviously, I like to quote songs, and people get nervous. It's like, aren't they going to sue us? Like, well, first, if they're suing us, we're doing pretty good because we got high enough attention.
Right. We got eyes in high places.
Yes. And second, we're actually using fair use, as in versus, Chat GPT means, fair use means everything. Like, no. Fair use means a little bit. I know enough about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. If that ever causes issue, like how much research or like studying do you have to do to understand like that fair use clause of like, no, we can get away with like 3 lines, but if you do 5, that's too, or like a whole verse, that's too much. Like,
it's a tricky thing. And honestly, I just wing it.
Okay.
And I've gotten bitten by it. Like I used a public domain character once for one of my books, and she was public domain, but her name was trademarked. The company came back later and got it. Their company called AC, and they do like FinForce and all of that, and it's totally built up as a public domain characters universe, but it's only the women. So it's a kind of imagine a Batman comic, but only women and fetishized, and that's basically. But and I remember I was talking to him about it. I was like, yeah, no, I almost wish we didn't trademark them, but yeah, no, stop.
I love the regret in the like, hey, I have to say this. Can you not do that?
Well, they were just tired of having to always defend it. And they're like, oh, God. Because that's the other trick is the minute you don't defend things. And I found out that, honestly, in the scheme of things, this is how as good as your lawyer is, as is shown with, like, Mickey Mouse and Superman and all that. Staying in the public domain longer, it really... Because I feel bad because all these people, like, oh, I'm afraid they're going to steal my ideas. And I'm like, I know you feel possessive and that's good, but not doing it. I mean, the people who are too lazy and grifters or, who steal stuff are not going to steal your idea. They're going to steal something simple, and or this and that. And because I always hear things like, oh, how much does it cost to get it to the copyright office? And it's like, well, technically, once it's in print, it's copyrighted.
Yeah.
But then again, it's all up to your lawyers to argue the points back and forth.
Yep.
So, of course, I have a IP lawyer friend, and he would be like, no, David, that's not, no. Stop that.
Stop lying. It's good to have people like that, though, because then like that saves you the time from having to try and figure out all the legalese behind it, and just knowing like, hey, he's got my back. Like, can I do this? Cool. No? Okay. All right. Well,
he's actually there helping me to talk me down from things like, can I? No, you can't sue for anything. You have no grounds for anything. You're watching TV.
Right.
You're not Sam Watterson. You're not going to argue your way to anything.
That's great. So with Dusk, it obviously is vampirism. Have vampires like always been your go-to horror? Like, is Bela Lugosi for you like top tier, the best Universal that there is, or was it just like a realm that you wanted to play in, and then?
No, it's always been vampires first.
Okay.
Sort of thing. I pick on Rob Moltari. I can't know if I'm saying his name right. Rob Moltari. He does Night Wolf.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I always pick on him. It's like werewolves. It's like, we got vampires. They're not up in the center and all that. And it just comes in the whole thing because I've lived through so many trends, like, the zombie trends, which have come back and forth. And I like a good zombie movie and all that. But it's like, it's all like, it's like vampires, because vampires are so more complex and they're versatile.
Yeah.
And all of that. And it's just sexier all around, not in totally just a sex way, but just totally sexy in a more rounded way. And so like there's a lot more to it than others, and not that I don't enjoy, because obviously I put a lot of supernatural and dark magics and all of that, but it's vampires first.
Okay. Is that the same for when you're watching movies, or is that just from like your creation standpoint?
No, for movies too. I've watched a lot of dumb vampire movies when I could have watched better zombie or werewolf movies. Some of them, it's like, oh, they're just going to push the buttons, and you can feel them pushing the buttons, and it feels very mechanical, but you're like, okay, I'm good. I mean, I know it's like you're manipulating me and telling me you're doing it, but.
Yep. And sometimes, like, that's all I want.
Yeah.
I
was rewatching the Blade TV show, and sometimes you're like, oh, and then you're sometimes like, oh, that's the right type of cheese. Yes, just give me that. Oh, that's some good Gouda. Yes, thank you.
Exactly. Yep. Let me see. So I noticed at some point in the book, there's an Anthrax t-shirt. Did you write that in, or was that the artist? Were you like, hey, give them a metal shirt?
I think it was just a metal shirt. I never specify. I may give some names to help.
Okay.
Because like I did a horror book to where I put myself in the story. It wasn't me, but I was visually. And I said, just give me some, just make me put metal shirts on me, which I don't wear many metal shirts. And when I do, I try to make them obscure. And of course, I'm in an AC/DC shirt, and I hate AC/DC. So I'm just all like, fine, whatever. When we put on Children of Bodom, it's like, I'm not going to know who that is, David.
Yeah, because all that to say, like, is that your go-to genre as well for music?
Oh yeah. My first wife got me into metal, and as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit more into like your epic and epic metal and all of that, like Nightwish and Visions of Atlantis. But no, I grew up on like Machine Head, and like I saw Machine Head when they first started. Children of Bodom, Sepultura, all just I could go on and all that. But as you get older, you start getting headaches a little bit more easier. You just get like or even like Corrosion of Form. And he's like, okay, I don't want to kill everyone today. I want people to hurt, but I don't want slaughter right now.
Right. Right. I don't want to be swimming through a sea of guts and blood.
Yes, yes, yes. Maybe some belly aches or something, suffer, don't die, whatever.
Right.
Well,
Wake
so,
up with lower back pain.
yes.
I had a contractor do work at our house, and he built like a half bath and a media room down in the basement for us. And he didn't finish the job. And I was like, well, I can't wish death upon him because like that's just not who I am. Because
Yeah.
like he's got a family, but like I don't know. And my friend's wife was like, I wish that his socks are never fully dry. And I was like, oh, that's devious. And so now I just like anytime we have anything that's like, damn it, that we discover or whatever, it's like that. Or like, I hope his bacon is always slightly undercooked. Like just
Oh,
weird curses like that. And I'm like, no, that's right in my lane. You know, it's like cheery and funny, but also like that would suck. Like every
yeah.
time you flip over the pillow, it's not cold on the other side. Like just minor inconveniences. That's where I've gotten with a lot of my life too.
Yeah.
Where, you know, things just kind of calm down. I'm not full of rage and death and hatred anymore.
Just a minute.
So let me
Sorry, I had
see.
knocking at the door.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. The last thing, and this is more just like I just love this, was the
Mhm.
Keytar battle with the DJ in
Mhm.
Aroma. Like anytime a Keytar shows up in anything, especially
Yes.
set in like an 80s, like neon in this war, I was just like, God, that's good. Like I just freaking love that. So the book is totally full of fun. It's full of horror. It's full of vampires. It's full of magic and music and pop culture references. And I just like, I hope that we push this to the moon. I hope everything gets fully funded quickly for your sake, for just mental health. That it just gets so that we don't have to, you know, stress about like, is it,
Yeah, I had a full black beard before this started. Now look at it. Look at it.
this morning it was
Yeah.
jet black.
Yes.
Well, David, that's the end of my notes, which means the only other thing left to do. Actually, I have two things. Let's pose for this is a new thing. Let's pose for a YouTube thumbnail. So here we go. Perfect. And then the other thing is, I started this show to give indie creators a voice and a space to talk about their books themselves and anything that they have that they want people to hear. That said, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. If you have anything that you want anybody that watches this or listens to this, if there's anything you want them to know, it could be about your book. It doesn't have to be. This is your space. Have at it.
Now, I want to say a couple of quick things. First, support indie creators because everyone goes, "Oh, I love this IP or that IP," and I love Star Wars and Dungeons and Dragons and all that. But people forget, where did that come from? Come from one schmuck filmmaker or some dumb kids playing in their basement in Milwaukee and all that. It doesn't come fully formed. So you gotta come from somewhere. So you gotta support everyone and all that. And that also means everyone can join in. It's all like, oh wow, I wish this would happen or that would happen. It's all like, well, then make it happen. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's what I would say is support indie and be indie would be some way to put it.
I love it. That's so clear and concise. I can't do anything to improve upon it, so I'm not even going to try. Support indie, be indie. David, I appreciate you hanging out with me on launch day when you have everything else going on. I can't wait to see Dusk Love Bites just blow through the funding goal and hit all of the success that we possibly can. Where can people find you on social media?
Easiest place is Facebook. I'm getting old, so chasing all these media places, and then crazy people buy them and let in other crazy. It's like, oh my god, I can't. I'm gonna go back to the live journal where I just rambled on and had no, character limit.
It was great. Cool. So Facebook is that's Dusk Comics. I think I have that linked in the description. It should be.
Yeah.
Also in the description is the campaign link, so you can click it and then go and check out the page and support it. There's digital, there's physical, there's multiple covers, there's all sorts of goodness, there's prints, all the things to hit all of the fan bases. for anybody out there that enjoys horror and vampires. David, I appreciate you hanging out with me. I'm doing
Thank you. It's
the
been a
best
great
thing.
talk.
Absolutely. Anytime that I can talk with indie creators about comics and horror is a great night for me. So thank you for hanging out. I look forward. Hang on. After I end the stream, I got some logistical stuff for you.
Sure.
And then, like, what's a good podcast without a good tagline? So that's going to do it for this interview, punks. Go do the good thing for you and read some indie comics and then create some too. We're out of here.
Make them now.
And then we wait on this to circle. I don't know if people can